Hello, everybody, and welcome to Industry Live. I am Diana, and today we have such a good person that we're going to be interviewing, JD McCabe, and his story is very, very interesting. It's better than a Lifetime movie script. So stay tuned for that. We'll be bringing him on shortly, but right now I want to give you the opportunity to start sharing the link. Make sure you get on here and start watching us. Make sure you share, connect, comment, and you're going to want to comment in this chat today and this live because you're going to have so many questions. So, without further ado, let me introduce our special guest today, JD McCabe.
Diana, good evening, and thank you for having me on tonight. I really appreciate it. And for all those that are going to jump on and listen, I thank you for your sacrifice of time. So I appreciate it.
Well, I'm not even going to waste any time. So, tell us a little bit about you and about your book, The
Okay.
Third Gift and My Dance with the Devil and Her Mother.
Yeah.
Tell me all about it.
I will try to give you the Cliff Notes version of it if you'd like. But yeah, the title, I'll explain the title first. So the third gift, I don't mind telling people right off the bat. The third gift was a revelation that my wife, my now ex-wife, made to me once we had separated after being in a reasonably happy marriage for 17 years. And I can talk about my perspective, down the road here now. My perspective has changed now that I've been in a healthy relationship, not married, but a healthy relationship. But the first two gifts are our kids. I've got a son and a daughter. My son is named Billy. My daughter's Katie. They're 28 and almost 25. But after a reasonably happy marriage, we separated. It was a very tumultuous 5 years towards the end. And the third gift was once we'd separated and went to mediation, she made the accusation that I gave her sexually transmitted herpes.
Ooh. So let me ask
Yeah.
you this. Betrayal,
Yeah.
lies. She tried
Yeah.
to poison you.
Yes.
So how do you find all this out? You're just having a happy marriage, going to work, thinking you have a perfect little life, and all this is happening?
Yep. And I think that's why the title is perfect, because had she never made that accusation, had she left that card in her pocket, and she does indeed have sexually transmitted herpes. I do not. By the grace of God, I was delivered from that. Don't have any STDs. Um, but had she never played that card, I do not know where I would be today, emotionally or mentally. And I don't know what my relationship would be with my kids. But one of the story is very complex and complicated, and it's all packed into the book, including our alimony trial, our domestic violence trial, my 9 days in psychiatric lockup. But through that revelation, I not only discovered that everything she was accusing me of doing, she was doing.
So
It was classic,
there's a saying
classic
in
protection.
Spanish. There's a saying in Spanish that they said, el león piensa que todos son de su condición. So the lion thinks that everybody is a lion, right? Because of what they do. So
Yeah.
when you told me about that, it reminded me of that quote in Spanish. It's like, oh, so she was accusing you of things. So let's start from the beginning, right?
Yeah.
So you're in a relationship. How do you start feeling sick? How do you know, or what were the first steps to
Yeah.
getting all this unveiled?
All of this other, well, I think the biggest step really was that revelation. So in the spring of 2014, I used to be a pretty good sized guy. In the book, I was very gracious to myself in the book. I said I weighed 225 pounds, but as I look back at pictures now, it's probably 250, 255. But I started working out through the inspiration of my son. Nothing intense, just lifting weights 3 days a week, 1 hour at a time. I said I just need something. I can get into the gym and get out. He suggested I start taking protein after I work out. He was already away at college. It was our daughter that was home with us, and unfortunately, she got caught in the middle of the storm. But in less than 6 weeks, I lost 35 pounds, and then it was
Oh, wow.
40, 45, 50, 55. And then I started experiencing some tingling in my fingers and toes, intestinal issues, dizzy spells. And of course, I would consult a physician because I'm losing way too much weight. What is going on? It was at that time, it was in early 2014, that she began her subtle gaslighting of accusations of infidelity. It would then pivot to, once I started losing weight, It only
Oh, so
furthered.
now you have
Now,
you're
hey,
trying to look good for somebody else.
bingo. It further cemented her story with her mother. Thus, she's in the subtitle, My Dance with the Devil and Her Mother, because she would turn on me like a cobra, and we can talk more about that. But it further cemented her story. Look at him, he's working out. And she would come to visit periodically, and I'd see them as I'm driving. They're in the back seat comparing pictures of me from, a year ago. And it was a stark difference. I mean, by that point, I had lost like 60, 65 pounds. So that then only fueled her next accusation that I was doing drugs. You've got to be doing something. And ironically, I guess if ironic is the right word, but when I started taking the protein powder, she would mock me about that as well. She would say, I know you're putting something in your protein powder. And she would pull it out of the cupboard, and I would begrudgingly read the ingredients to her. And I'm saying, I'm not putting anything in my protein powder. But I mean, she was
So
throwing it in my face because I believed that she was putting the arsenic in the
she was the
protein powder.
one doing that, and she was telling you, but
Yeah.
flipping it around like every other thing that she did to you. So you think she was
And so
putting
she
arsenic
wasn't,
in there?
yeah. And so I I had elevated white blood cell counts, liver enzymes that were off, a couple of other enzymes that were off. I was over the course of a 4 month period, I was evaluated for leukemia, Lou Gehrig's, early onset of Parkinson's, you name it, they couldn't find anything.
Did you feel sick or you were just losing weight?
I felt pretty good other than the dizzy spells and the tingling and the neck pain. I was having some joint pain, but it wasn't debilitating. And quite frankly, early on, I'm like, I didn't know it was arsenic, but I'm like, what, when I first lost the first 30 pounds, I'm like, this is fantastic. I'm working out 3 days a week. I switched from Coke to Diet Coke, and
You're like,
I lost
bingo,
a ton.
this is
Yeah, I found the miracle cure, just working out and Diet Coke. But so I would not discover the arsenic poisoning until about a year after we had separated. So, and in between all that, the accusations would continue. They would intensify. We would talk about separation. And the biggest mistake that I made for anybody that's listening, if you're going through anything in your life, anything that you even might think is insignificant, please find someone to confide in, whether it's religious counsel, whether it's therapist, whether it's friend, family, somebody that you can trust. I come from a large family. I have eight brothers and sisters. Um, I have had a large professional network, but as I was going through this, I told nobody.
and
And
why
it was
was that? Were you shameful? This is basically domestic abuse, right?
absolutely,
On the other side of the coin, like you're the one being domestically abused in
yeah,
emotionally, through the protein powder, like everything. So
yeah.
how come you couldn't come out and you did not feel safe telling anyone, or you didn't
I was
felt
trying.
embarrassed, or you felt like I'm going to work this out?
I'm going to work this out. There might have been a little bit of embarrassment too, and shame, and I haven't really talked about that much. But I plan on doing a couple of posts on shame. For the female audience out there that may hear a guy admit that he feels shame, they might go, oh, okay, right. But anyhow, it was shame for not something I did, but ultimately be shame that how did I not pick up on all this? Why did I allow her to steal my identity? Why did how did she get that far inside my head and push me to the brink of thinking I'm going crazy here. I don't know what the hell's going on. But so there's a couple of complicated things here. You take all that I had going on with me physically. I was hoping that I either had a brain tumor or something wrong with me that I could maybe appease her to go, look, because she built up this crazy story that I was controlling, I was abusive. She would begin to put that in my daughter's head when she was 15. And once my daughter came back into my life, she confided in me that mom had told her I was a drug addict, but she didn't feel safe to come to me and ask me about it, because of what mom had told her about my anger and my anger outbursts, which were all horseshit, excuse my language.
You're fine.
But again, I wouldn't figure out the arsenic stuff until about a year after we separated. I'd put my health on the back burner because we started our legal journey once we separated.
Let me ask you really quick. So
Yeah.
you're going through this. She's making you, accusing you of cheating. And so you're tippy toeing around her, basically,
Absolutely.
trying to
Walking
make everything.
walking on eggshells, as they
And
say.
then, do you start believing this at some point?
Oh, I never believed obviously I knew I wasn't cheating on her and I knew I wasn't doing drugs, but the other complicated factor, which I talk about everything in the book, and like I said, there's a lot packed into 360 pages. And I've had somebody sent me a message today, go, I just read your book for the fourth time, really enjoyed it the fourth time through. And I'm like, well, you probably picked up on something that,
Yeah, that's what happens to me. I have the audiobook, and every time I'm hearing it, I'm like, something new. I catch something new. So,
and if I dive, well, thank you very much. And if I dive back into it, I go, oh yeah, I forgot that happened. But her alleged autoimmune disease, I started to question her delusions, her paranoia, just her anger outbursts. I started chalking that up to what I thought at the time was her underlying autoimmune disease. I changed the name of it in the book at the request of the publisher, but I call it fibromyalgia. But 6-7 years into our marriage, she began the journey of being diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and I never questioned it. But we would later uncover that she, in fact, does not have an autoimmune disease. This was through our alimony trial, because their story was that her attorney built, and of course, their attorney built, and her mother backed it up. Her mother testified against me. Was that she's too sick to work. So all that I put her through on top of her autoimmune disease that she suffered for 20 plus years, she's never going to be able to hold down a full-time job. She's never going to physically be able to work. Well, they never brought anybody to the trial. There was no medical expert. Not one of her doctors who allegedly diagnosed her with this ever took the stand, because we would get the medical records from the Mayo Clinic down in Jacksonville, Florida. Because it's like, if you're gonna allege that you're this sick, you need to prove it. There was no proof. There was proof to the contrary that said, no, they didn't. They never diagnosed her. They said, if in fact she does have an autoimmune disease, it is very minor.
so what was she? Why was she kept going to the doctors? I know. You
It
mentioned
was. It was.
she had a degree, and then
She had 2 degrees, and that's one of the sad parts of the story. Is she was beautiful. She was intelligent. She graduated with a degree in occupational training and development when she was 8 months pregnant with our daughter Katie. And I talk about it in the book, but I think her father's death pushed her over the edge. So that's the first red flag that I missed when I met her, is she had been married for 8 weeks, she said. I was married briefly for 8 weeks. I never moved in with him. I was looking for a father figure. He was 11 years her senior. He had a 12-year-old daughter. Her mother and her grandmother, I didn't press them too hard on it, but they're like, no, she was looking for a father figure because she hasn't had her father in her life for years. But it turns out she was very close to her father up until her first marriage. But when I started dating her, she was estranged from her dad for 10 years. And another red flag that I missed, I remember when we were dating, I can picture it today. She had the shittiest grin on her face when she would talk about back in the days of fax machines, right? She would fax nasty letters to her father's places of employment for
why?
his employers to see. As it turns out, she's just that vindictive and that evil. So my subtitle, "My Dance with the Devil," it's no joke.
Ugh.
I struggled with, was I really married to somebody this evil? Was I laying down every night with somebody this dark?
That kind of like rings in my head. It's like you could be living with somebody for so long and not really know who that person is. That always has kind of scared me. And I always tell my husband, I'm like, look, babe, I'm 100. So I know that whatever happens, it's not on me. And I
Yeah.
feel like I can rest, right? Like whatever happens, it's not on me. But because I worked on a homicide show, and you see all these things. That's why your story was so like, I need him on here. You see all these things that people that you would never expect, or the way they live their life, you would never see that they have all this extra second life and all these other things. Like you mentioned, she was going through a drug addiction. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I'll close the loop on her father's story because so through the innocence of our son, when he was 6 years old, they knew about Grandpa. They had never met him, and he just innocently said, why don't you call him, Mom?" And she did, and they reconnected. So they reconnected for 5 years, and I supported it, but I was worried about her getting hurt again. So
Uh-huh.
as it turns out, rest his soul. They reconnected for about 5 years. I would always say to her, "Are you guys revisiting the past at all?" And she's like, "No, we're just focusing on the future and keeping it superficial." And I never rocked the boat with him to say, "Hey, what actually happened?" I
Yeah, what
should
did
have,
happen?
but I never
So you
did.
don't know.
Hmm.
You
Well, I
never
do know.
oh,
I believe she cheated on her first husband too, because her first husband, her father would take him in. So when I met her, she's like, "Yeah, he moved in with my dad." And I'm like, "Why would your dad take in your ex-husband? Why would your dad take in your ex-husband?" And the other piece of it is when she was 2 years old, her father came out of the closet and accepted his homosexuality. So her parents got divorced. And so, but she again was very close to him and to his life partner. He had a life partner for a long time. She was very close to him until after the first marriage separated. So she's like, "Well, I already told you my father's gay. So he was attracted to my now ex-husband, and that's why he allowed him to move in with him." And I
oh,
did, but I did validate through looking at records down in the Florida area. I mean, I did so much research that, yeah, he lived with him for a year. He lived with him with his life partner and another woman who I had no idea who the other woman was, but they were on the deed for the home. Um, but he had a massive heart attack 5 years after they reunited, and because at the time Florida didn't recognize gay marriage, she had to make the difficult decision to turn off his life support. He was essentially brain dead. So I think the guilt. I think the guilt of being estranged from her father for 10 years, losing 10 years of her life with him, pushed her over the edge. And it's at the same time that I would later discover her drug addiction. It happened about 2 years. His life partner would also die 2 years later at a pretty young age from cancer. But it was at that time I tracked her drug addiction back to 2009, 2010. So she had a drug addiction. She clearly has some underlying, mental issues going on. But as one of the other things that I looked into is borderline person. They think she has borderline personality disorder, and I dug into that a little bit. And they don't think it's not a mental health condition. It's a mental condition for sure, but it's a learned behavior.
really?
Yeah,
That is very
it's a
interesting.
learned behavior can be brought on by feeling abandoned or trauma in your teens and da da da. And well, she was abandoned, when she was a very young child. She was raised by a single mother who I don't think she would clean her act up, but she would always tell me that she was never very close to her mother. So there's a lot of hidden secrets in the family that were started to become revealed through the third gift. So it was that revelation that I gave her herpes that led me to discover that everything she was accusing me of doing, she was doing. So I think you can imagine the emotional weight that was lifted to go, holy cow, all this time she's beat me into the ground. Her mother's threatening to kill me, suggesting I'm addicted to porn, I'm addicted to drugs, when in fact it's her daughter. And I would confront her daughter, or I could confront her mother about my concerns. But again, I did not discover any of this until well after we separated. But the changes that I started to see in her mentally, I would consult privately with a couple of rheumatologists and a couple neurologists that I knew because I'm in the medical pharmaceutical field. And I'd talk to them privately and they'd go, "Oh, yeah. With an autoimmune disease, it can attack every organ in your body. It can explain her mental changes. It can explain her cognitive changes, the cardiac impairment." So
And
we
what
would,
were some of those changes that you could see in her behavior?
I would see anger outbursts from her. I would see cognitive impairment. She would have trouble making it home, finding directions home from places that she had traveled to for years, you know? And
Was it real or was it a lie? Was she just trying to buy some time?
I think part of that was real, but I think the cognitive impairment was caused by the 3 different formulations of amphetamines that she was
Oh,
taking that I had no idea she was taking. And she also had, while we were happily married, and I use happily in quotations, she also had 2 stroke-like events. And she was hospitalized legitimately with numbness in the left side of her face, left side of her arm. She had difficulty walking, difficulty talking. There we go. Yeah, she had difficulty walking, difficult time talking. Again, I had no idea that she was taking 3 different formulations of amphetamines. I didn't know she was taking amphetamines at all. I didn't know she was
was
taking.
she pretty thin?
She was rail thin, but she had always been thin.
Mm-hmm.
But she was real thin. But it can cause paranoia. It can cause delusions. It certainly causes cardiac issues. But we'd see cardiologist after cardiologist, and never once did she tell them, "Oh, by the way, I'm taking 3 different formulations of amphetamine."
So this whole time you're at work, she's out doing her drugs, or
Doing her drugs and whoever she would stumble
and
across.
doing something else. And so all this time you would come home, she'd be home like nothing, or could you tell something was going on?
When I look back on it now, things are clear, very clear, right? Things that I missed. But a lot of the symptoms, like her hair falling out, she had thinning hair, mouth sores, swollen lymph nodes. I could smile about it now. I would chalk that up at the time to her autoimmune disease, because
Yeah, of
those were
course.
symptoms, could be symptoms of an autoimmune disease. Also could be secondary stages of syphilis. So I spent hours and hours and hours looking up all of because when I built spreadsheets, when I went into her pharmacy claims, and again, I had full legal access to it, and her medical claims, I spent hours, Diane, I can't stress how many hours I spent in addition to my full-time job, figuring out what doctor she saw. I discovered that she was seeing another OBGYN and was being treated for more than likely chlamydia. And so, I mean, I found all sorts of trails of not only medical evidence, but pharmacy evidence. And as I dug into syphilis, the only drug recommended to treat syphilis is penicillin. She's allergic to penicillin. So they prescribed her doxycycline on a couple of occasions. So I'm thinking her syphilis probably went untreated for a while, and that would explain the symptomatology of the
Everything.
lymph nodes, hair falling out, mouth sores. So it's all raw and real and laid out in the book. All of my evidence was laid out.
I got more questions. So then she commits you into a psych ward. Tell me a little bit about that. Involuntary.
Yeah, involuntarily committed. And that happened in the spring of 2014, probably. Well, it was September of 2014. I know that for a fact. I can give you the exact dates, but it was probably 6 months after I'd started working out. And I started, as I was seeing that family practitioner, I would later discover, so I'm seeing this family practitioner, our marriage is collapsing, and I have no idea why. We're going to see therapists after therapists, and if she didn't like the therapist's position that they would take, we'd be done with that therapist.
And question, collapsing in what way?
Right? Collapsing emotionally.
What was your home life like?
My daughter pulling away from me, wanting really very little to do with me, feeling isolated in my own home.
So you were the enemy.
Yeah, not knowing what accusation I might come home to next.
Oof.
To confusion of, on the flip side, telling me she loves me. One day she's telling me she loves me and wants to continue to work things out and and doesn't want to separate. And then 10 days later, she would say to me, "I know how important sex is to guys. If you want somebody else, just let me know."
So you're opening the door, you're coming in. What atmosphere would you feel? You never knew?
Just tension. Just tension. And that would only fuel her. Why are you in such a bad mood? I'm like, well, because you're not, you won't talk to me. As we go through therapy, they try to give you coaching on how to approach each other and share what's bothering you. And, I would attempt to try to address some of these little arguments that we would have, and she would dismiss me. She would just say, everything's hurtful to you. I'm like, listen, we just went to therapy where we're supposed to talk about things, talk things out. and you don't want to talk. You don't want to share with me what was going on when you accused me of this or accused me of that. I mean, it got to the point though where ultimately I would begin to laugh it off
Wait,
and not really understand. But anyhow, so that summer was tumultuous. Started losing weight, wasn't sure what was going on with me from a health perspective. Her mother in June threatened to kill me on a beach trip, suggested I was addicted to porn, I was addicted to drugs, threatened to kill me because she was beginning to buy everything that her daughter was telling her about me. And they were connected at the hip. The interesting thing about that beach trip, Diana, is her brother was there. She only has one brother. Her brother was there with his wife and kids. And you would think that if his little sister was indeed fearful of me and went to her mother, I would have thought the brother would have come to me too. Yeah.
we have a question from Julio Gomez here. He's saying, did you ever feel bad vibes towards her after that?
Explain that to me, Julio. You mean like hatred, anger?
Yes, like did you ever feel angry towards her during this process or even after? Like, how was your healing, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, there were times, but yeah, there were times. I mean, if I would let myself sit and think about everything that she did and everything that she tried to do, and I focused only on that, yeah, I probably would have exploded by now. But I quickly, believe it or not, I quickly forgave her and her mother, especially after the herpes revelation, because it set me free emotionally. It was the beginning of the truth after dealing with a year and a half to 2 years of being just shredded emotionally and gaslit and pushed to the point of suicide. And again, I wasn't suicidal when I was involuntarily committed, but a couple of years later, I sure as heck would be. But no, I mean, I'm too grateful to be. That's corny. I just came up with it, but I'm too grateful to be hateful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it. New tagline.
Yeah, I'm too grateful. I'm too grateful to be hateful. And I mean, because God delivered me. I mean, think about this for a minute. And I really appreciate the opportunity you're giving me here tonight. It's like a free therapy session. But had she never revealed the herpes to me, I don't. Again, like I said, I don't know where I'd be today. I'd been in psychiatric lockup. My kids were led to believe one thing. So if Dad tested positive for herpes, who are they going to believe? Well, who gave it to who? So the truth set me free. I was handed the truth by God. I was delivered by God. He spared me, a positive test when in fact I more than likely should have been infected because both of my kids have read the book. I had their full consent before I wrote it. I wasn't, and I changed the names and I changed a few locations, but I had their full consent. When my daughter read it, she's like, Dad, why'd you have to put the sex stuff in there? Well, I put the sex stuff in there to provide appropriate context. So we had been together, even though we hadn't been together, we hadn't been intimate in 4 months. We had been together 3 nights in a row, about 3 or 4 weeks before I was exiled out of the home. And we were together 3 nights in a row at her, request and suggestion and so forth, so on. Well, the CDC, the STD expert that we would later retain, he pinpointed the time when he thinks she contracted herpes to somewhere in February, between February and April, while we were still married.
Oof.
So she played that card. The only reason she revealed that she had contracted herpes is because she was certain she had infected me.
Oh, so she had to come clear. Yeah.
She didn't have to, but she was certain she had infected me, and it would have rounded out her story because the story she was building was the one.
Because she was turning it that you were the
He's
one.
controlling. He's abusive. I had been.
Yeah.
He's cheating, and because she went to our kids. Even I didn't have a relationship with my daughter at that point. I was out of the home. She wouldn't talk to me. Blah blah blah. I took the high road and let her have her space. But she told both of them, I had a very good relationship with my son, so he remained fairly transparent. But I tried not to always talk about what was going on with Mom and I. He was in college, for God's sakes, and I wanted him to live his life. But she went to both of them before I revealed my negative results. So I went and got tested. And ironically, July 9th, So July 7th, yeah, July 7th, this Friday will be the 8th anniversary of her dropping that grenade on me when I gave her herpes. July 9th is my new Independence Day because that's when I got my negative results. But we sat on that for a month. I hired a private eye. We wanted to try to figure out who the person was that she may have been running around with, persons, people, who knows. But again, she destroyed her phone, so we could never figure that out. But we sat on it for a month. But even though I had negative test results, she went and told both of our kids that I have undeniable proof that your father cheated on me. He gave me herpes. But hell, I didn't even know what herpes was at 50, let alone my kids knowing what it is at 18 and 14, 15, or whatever they were at the time. So
Correct.
she was doing all she could to bury me with my kids. So had I contracted it, her story would have been perfect. He's crazy. He's abusive. He's a drug addict. He did 9 days in a psychiatric facility and he's been cheating on me and he gave me herpes. I mean, it would have taken her victim meter through the roof.
So it does make sense. Like that was the third gift because it did save you.
God saved me
from all that.
God saved me. God delivered me. And the only reason all of that became important and we pursued it, I know a lot of states out there are no-fault states. Everybody can run around on everybody, and either way, you're splitting everything 50-50. But in North Carolina, where where all this went down, I now live in South Carolina, but in North Carolina, if there's proof of infidelity, the guilty party should be, by law, barred from receiving alimony.
So that wasn't the case, though.
No. And we had been married 23 years, so the alimony would have been substantial. So yeah, she was awarded alimony. It's not going to give away the book, but I'm thankful that it wasn't for as many years as they asked for.
We have one final question to wrap up because there's so many layers to your story that it's
like happy to come back anytime.
Yes, we're gonna have to continue. But there's a question here asking that if you felt after this relationship, how hard was it for you to trust in someone else? And I know now you have you're married again, you have a beautiful wife and
no, I'm not married. Not married.
Not yet.
But it took me. I had no desire. Hell, I had no desire for 3-4 years to even date or even think about dating. And I was really making sure my kids were okay, mending my relationship with my daughter who came back into my life. My favorite chapter in the book called Hi Daddy. When she came back, she was old enough to start recognizing the issues with mom. But when I was introduced to the fantastic lady who I've been dating for almost 4 years now, through a long-time trusted friend, yeah, I had some trust issues for sure. So we broke up a bunch of times, and that was on me, because my mantra had always been, and I would say this to anybody.
Did you feel that she was cheating on you? Did you feel all these trust issues? Like, what was the trigger?
No, she's been extremely transparent. She's been extremely vulnerable. I've been transparent and vulnerable. She knew about the book on the second date because her friend told her I wrote a book. I gave her one of the first copies of the book, but she didn't read it right away, which I didn't expect her to. But no, the issue for me was, do I want to put the work in? Do I want to open my heart again? And I've told her, and I would tell anybody, and I tell my kids this: don't look for somebody to make you happy. If you're searching for happiness in someone else, there's something you need to look deep within yourself. She certainly made me happier, but I told her from day one, I'm not looking for you or anyone to make me happy.
Yeah, happiness always comes from inside. Yeah. Like you really have to make yourself happy.
Somebody can make you happier, but my happiness and my emotional well-being rests with me, And so the issues were really COVID had just hit. We were 6 months into the relationship. The book came out. I was still dealing with some PTSD from the psychiatric facility. And when the book came out, it kind of resurrected a lot of nightmares in me. And I still I went back into therapy. And I just said, I need a change of scenery. I'm living way too close to where all of this went down. My kids are at college. My son was employed and out of college. Nothing keeping me here. And so I said, I'm going. I'm moving to Charleston. And, you know, she supported it. So we became friends and we continued to talk all the time. And we've now been doing the long distance thing for 3 years. We're 4.5 hours away.
Oh,
I
that's
don't
not
know how far El Paso and Dallas are, but
bad.
quite a ways. But we're 4.5 hours away, but we make it work, and we see each other, quite a bit. And expectations have been kept simple. It's like, I don't think she's looking to get married. I'm not looking to get married. We're just
I was
looking to.
rushing it. The Latina in me always wants to marry
No, no,
people.
no, no. No, but I'm in love, and that's why I said that when you find somebody that appreciates you for who you are and you can truly be yourself with them, then you've hit the jackpot.
Yeah.
And so God has blessed me in so many ways. That should maybe be my next tattoo. Too grateful to be hateful. I don't know.
Hey, that's a good tagline. I still like it. So thank you for being on here today. And
Thank you.
how can people get your book?
Yeah, they can get. It's called. There it is, right there. It's called The Third Gift: My Dance with the Devil and Her Mother. It's available through Amazon, as you can see on the screen, either Kindle or audiobook. But if folks are interested in signed hard copies, I'd be happy to sign one, ship it out for a flat fee of $25. I just ask that they Venmo me at The Third Gift, and I'll be happy to send them a copy out. And as we talked about, Diana and Kimberly, before we got started here, I've not paid myself a dime for the book. I'm supporting a couple of nonprofits with the proceeds from the book, and I'm a one-man show. But I'm grateful to you, wonderful ladies, for the opportunity to share my story, and I'm thankful for all of the folks that have embraced it over the last 3 years and the support that I've received. But if folks want to find me, I'm on TikTok.
Yes,
Facebook.
make sure you follow him on TikTok. I love when you respond to the haters. It always makes me laugh. I'm always like, yay, go, go, go. It's so funny how people have such bravery online.
It's true.
And they don't really know the story, right? They don't even know that you're not receiving a dime for this. So
Right.
definitely follow him on TikTok.
But I'm very thankful for all the support that I've received, and it's an uphill climb, but I'm going to continue to promote the story, and we'll see where it goes. But
well, we're definitely bringing you back because we want to go deep into your whole psychiatric detention ward, involuntary.
I'd be happy to come back, and I only dedicated a chapter to that. I probably could have written 3 or 4. But
yeah, and I just want to know more about you and what you experienced and all of that, because everything that you experience in life gives you a different outcome and shows you how to be different when you come out of that, right? So you have a lot of knowledge to share with other people.
Thank you, Sandy.
Especially men.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I know we're wrapping it up, but I'd love to come back. That's one of the reasons why I wrote it. I mean, for a lot of reasons. It's a crazy, twisted story. And the names that I used on my side, like my attorneys, my family, my friends, whatever, they came to me before I even started to write the book. And they said, when you write the book, I want you to use this name for me. And so it was my therapist that said, you need to write a book when all this is over, because there's just not enough books out there about men on the other side of the equation.
And one more thing, and we'll wrap it up with this. Do you feel that
I can go all night? Yeah.
Do you feel that writing this book has helped you, like, therapeutically?
Yes. It was a double-edged sword, but I would say definitely. The most difficult part for me to write were the chapters about our domestic violence trial and our alimony trial. Because with both of them, I would have preferred to get written transcripts. It would have been much easier, but they wanted to charge me $10,000 for those. So I said, send me the audio transcripts. So I would listen on my iPad to the testimony, 17 hours of courtroom testimony, and I would type what I thought was relevant. And of course, I had a fantastic editor before all was said and done. But I had to relive listening to my now ex-mother-in-law, ex-wife, a couple of girlfriends, her therapist that she, really manipulated into believing everything she told her. I mean, testifying against me. I had to listen to all that testimony again and hear that ringing in your ears of, just a character assassination for really a day and a half.
Wow.
Which, that was so it was cathartic, but it was also, when I say double-edged swords, because you're forced to reopen those boxes that you packed away.
Yeah.
And every date has an anniversary now. Like I just celebrated a birthday,
And the July 9th
July
coming
9th,
up.
which is my Independence Day. And but I now look back on those with a tremendous smile, and again gratitude to say, thank you, Lord, for getting me here today. And it was my kids, it's my faith, my family, and my friends that kept me going. But really, my kids, even when my daughter wasn't in my life, just knowing, all right, mom's off the deep end, and they're going to need me.
And who do you feel men in some type of domestic violence situation should reach out to? Because that's very difficult. That's your ego. You're supposed to be the alpha, and to come
Yeah.
out and say like, "Hey, this is happening."
I would say confide in a therapist, religious counsel, deacon at a church, family, friends, somebody. I had my two brothers, had I not been locked up in that psych facility, I probably wouldn't have told anybody. But my two brothers were like, damn it, we're coming to town. We're coming to figure out what the hell's going on. And even though they supported me staying in the marriage, or at least my brother, who's known as Al in the book, Big Al, he's my hero. Him and his wife, Jane, were there for me 24/7 for 4 years as I walked through hell. My house became their house became my house. But confide in somebody. I was blessed enough last October to give a talk at the U.S. Marine Corps base in Barstow, California, for their domestic violence prevention and awareness week. And talk about intimidation, speaking in front of 80 Marines, mostly men, all decked out in their camos, and their commanding officer. But I had several come up to me afterwards and say, how long are you going to be around base? I want to talk to you. And I stuck around for several hours and talked to them, and some of their stories, I'm like, whoa. But you confide in somebody. But it's what damn near cost me my life was and it's enabled her to isolate me and do what she needed to do to really twist me into a ball of emotional mess.
Oh man. Well, we're
Yeah.
definitely bringing you back. We're definitely thank you for being on today. And everyone that's watching, you can watch the replay. And thank you for being on Sensitive Assumptions Industry Celebrities. So until next time, keep watching, share, and make sure you follow and go buy the book. It's on Amazon. Have
Thank
a
you.
good
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
one.